Welcome to episode 4, and here we are. We're going to have some fun now. Now we're going to get to the good stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our pots aligned. So as you recall, we drilled holes in the front here, and we're going to start to look at our wiring and understand what we need to do with the pots. But the first thing we're going to do is take this cardboard box, and what I've done is I've put it here and I punched holes through so I have marked exactly where the pots go. So let's move this chassis out of the way. I'm going to get my muscles all strong on this thing. Okay, so we have our cardboard box, and that's exactly where the pots line up. And we know from when we did this that, just to be safe, this is the volume, this is the treble, that's the bass. Okay? And as we also know, this is the bottom, and this is the top. Okay? So it's really more like this. Okay? You gotta remember, this is from looking from inside the chassis. Hold on, let me make sure I got that right. Actually, if this is not this is the top here. See, you gotta check this stuff twice. So from looking inside the chassis, this is the direction. Okay? Let's look at our schematic. First we want to find our volume control. So if we look at our schematic, we'll see our volume here is a 1 meg audio taper. Right there. Volume. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our potentiometers. We're going to look for the 1 meg. That's not the one. Okay, right here we have a 1 meg audio taper. And we're going to mount it just like that. Okay? Treble. Let's look at our treble. Our treble control, 250K. Let's find our 250K pot. .25 mega ohms, right here. Okay? This is a Claristat. Okay? And our base, 250K. Simple, right? Now I haven't decided yet if I'm going to flip these around or not. These may be flipped over, whatever. Let me see, what else do we have here? And I should have 100K right here. Yep, got it. Okay, so we're not going to worry about the speed and intensity. So what are we going to do here? Well, first thing we're going to do is we're going to get these wired, and then the objective is once they're wired together where they need to be, lift them out of the box and insert them into the chassis. It makes it so much easier. So if we look at our schematic right here, let's start with our bass and treble. You'll see there's a common point here between the bass and the treble pot, which goes to 100K resistor, comes around here to a 0.047 cap, back to the end of this bass cap, bass pot. Also on this side is a 250 pico cap right here, which comes to this side. So you can see we could do a lot of this pre-work now. From the volume control perspective, there's really not a lot we could do in pre-wiring, but what we can do is wire all the grounds together. So that's going to be done by taking a piece of hookup wire like this and soldering it across all of these potentiometers and then running it back to our star ground point. Okay, you with me? I don't need to go any deeper on this because I'm sure most of you understand what I'm doing here, but that's the point of doing this in the box, is that I can then lift it out and reinsert it into the chassis and I'm good to go. So that's the plan on this thing. And obviously one other thing I didn't do on the chassis is I have to drill out the holes for these little standoffs so that the pots don't spin. That's easy to do. I got one on this side and I also have one here, which I'll have to do. We'll do that after we get this thing wired up. In order to solder the ground wire here, I'm just going to have to rough up these backs just a little bit. That's easy to do with a pick or an ice pick or something along those lines. And then clean it with alcohol and then solder those suckers in. So let me get all this done and I'll come back to you and show you what this control setup looks like. Okay, we've started wiring our power supply section, and the first thing you'll notice here, I've got these wires capped off. These are the this is the 5-volt rail and the center tap, and this is the 115-volt winding off the power supply transformer. We're going to use the 125-volt winding. So we've got these isolated, and really simple. You'll see I've got my black coming in to the fuse, to the switch, going back to the transformer, and then the neutral connects to the transformer. And then I have the center tap here of the high power side, which is going to get fused with half an amp fuse, and it goes right to ground. So that protects the transformer if something goes wrong. So we're going to address these wires, and then we're going to start getting our other power supply parts installed, including the diodes and the bridge rectifier. This is the bridge rectifier I'm going to use. And what I'm going to do, it has a built-in heat sink, and I chose this kind because I want to make sure we dissipate the heat. And I've got a plastic standoff here with a plastic screw, and I'm going to mount it somewhere in the chassis like so, standing up. This way it's very clear. On these things, just so you know, if you ever have one of these, here's the plus sign, right, and there's a little notch here, and it's always diagonal. So plus, minus, across, like this. And then your AC is on this side, okay? So let me get these wires dressed, and don't pay attention to this mess here. I'm going to lead dress this in a moment, but we're getting started. Be back. Should have pointed this out. You'll notice I left a lot of empty space here on these wire tops, so there's no chance that we're going to get any arcing. So let me get the rest of the heat wrap, shrink wrap on here. Okay, we've got these wires all protected, and it's going to just kind of lay down here on the chassis, and I'll probably put a dot of hot glue there just to hold it in. The reason why I'm leaving these wires so long is because, you know, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, 50 years from now, someone may get this thing and rip it apart and say, hey, I could use this transformer, and I would ruin the 5-volt winding if I cut these wires short. So we're going to leave enough space and be thoughtful of what may happen 50 years from now. Call me sentimental. All right, let me continue. Okay, so we're making some good progress here. We're going to get our 6.3-volt filament line going here. And one thing I should mention is that we're running DC filaments to these tubes, which is good. So what we're doing here is we're going to put in this 10 amp full wave bridge rectifier, which has a built-in heat sink. We're going to put some thermal compound on it, and we're going to mount it directly to the chassis there. And that will make sure this thing never overheats, and it'll basically last forever. So we put a little thermal compound on there, okay? And I'm using this type of compound, MX4. And of course, the flat end here is the positive, right across is the negative. So we're going to put it in just like that, just like so. And then we're going to run a screw up from the bottom and secure it in. Alright, so let me go mount that and we'll be back. Okay, she's all mounted. And you'll see we have marked here, positive, negative, and our AC side right there. So we're good to go. Now we can start wiring in our filament voltages. So that'll be the next thing that we do. And just to look at the diagram here, here's our rectifier that we just put in. And you'll see we have our positive right here, which comes across to this rail we're going to build for the filaments. And there is a capacitor right there, which is a 200 volt, 200 microfarad, 25 volt cap right here. So let me get building. So I want to show you what I did here. I'm wiring the filaments to this bridge rectifier. So I've got the 2 green wires here that come out of the transformer twisted, and I'm going to the AC side of the rectifier. And I've basically twisted these, wrapped them, did a pigtail basically. I have them here, and then I'm going to put a piece of heat shrink tape, heat shrink wrap over this one and this one, just to protect it and keep it out of harm's way. On this side, I've got the wires run on here, which are going to go to this tube. But I'm also going to have the ability on these 2 posts to mount this cap right here, C5, which is 200 microfarad 25. So the second thing I'll do is after I solder these connections which go to the tube, I'll be able to put a cap right across here. So that's going to be very convenient, and it'll be rock solid, and it'll make it easily serviceable if necessary, because I'm going to pigtail it as well. You'll just be able to lift it off. So let me get to soldering here, and then we'll see what this looks like when I get done. Okay, we have our filament wiring all done. So we've got our wires right here going to this 6550 tube, twisted low to the chassis, over to this pair of 12AX7s, Everything's twisted and everything is really low to the chassis, so we should be fine. And of course, I mentioned earlier that the filament line here is DC, so that's actually going to help with hum as well. So we should be in pretty good shape. Once I install this capacitor right here, this entire filament line will be done, and we'll be ready to proceed. So that's good. So now we're going to focus on this choke and getting some of these capacitors installed in this section. Which, if you look at the power supply drawing, it's these caps right here. C1 is already installed. That's the big one. So we got to put in this. We've got to put in a resistor, the choke, and then these two capacitors. So this one is a 0.33. This one is a 100 microfarad, and this is a 0.33 as well. Okay, so let's get on with that. Okay, just to update you where we are. We basically have our entire power section wired and ready to go, with the exception of this cap right here, which is a 200 microfarad 25 volt cap. It's going to go right across this rectifier, and that will complete the power section. You'll see I have our choke in here, and I have the wires of the choke coming here to a terminal strip, and I have this little contraption that I built with two terminal strips, and I've got my 0.33, my 500K 1 watt resistor, then I have a 100 microfarad 450 volt cap, and then the 0.33 600 volt cap again, and then this red wire here is my B+. So this will go to B+. So in theory, I've also connected this pilot light. So in theory, I could turn this thing on right now. Obviously, I'm not going to get a clean power, clean 6.3 volt here because I don't have the filtering cap there, the smoothing cap. But we're not going to do that yet. I'm going to wait until I get that cap in. It should be here tomorrow. And then we're going to do some initial testing and power up and all that. I got to be really careful because this cap here, this 1000 microfarad cap, it's going to take a while for that to drain out, right? If you look at the schematic here, right? When I turn this thing off, it's going to take this 500K resistor a while to drain this thing down. So we wouldn't want to be sticking our hands in here right away. So, obviously I can do that, or I can put a bleed resistor on there, which I may do later. But in essence, our power section is theoretically complete. And here's our B+ right here that I mentioned. And then after we test that, I'm going to put in an 8-pin tube here. I'm not going to put in my 6550 just in case. I'm going to put in any 8-pin tube and see if the filament's light. And the same thing on these 12AX7s. Then we're going to start wiring. Right, so the next thing we'll do after this is we'll put our potentiometers in here. They go right here in the front, and we also need to connect our output transformer to our B+. And I've left an open tab down here. You probably can't see it, but I've left a tab down here so I can connect it to the B+. So that's going to be the next course of action. But we're not going to connect this yet until I test the filaments. Right, I don't want to have anything else connected to this thing except for filaments right now. And we'll measure the B+ when we power it up and see what we're getting. And that's going to be the way we handle this thing. So real quickly, before I end this video, because I'm going to open up the next episode with the testing of the filaments. This thing is built way over spec, purposely. Right? It's got a really beefy transformer, beefy output transformer, beefy capacitor. I mean, I'm going over the top on this thing. Because I just don't, first of all, this 6550 tube is very sensitive to B+ voltages. So if I start cranking away on this thing, and I start draining my B+ low, the amp's going to sound like crap. So, we go over tolerance, and we never have to worry about it. And that's why we're doing that. Okay? So one thing I'll say before I close, I didn't expect to take up this much space with the power section. I had hoped that it would stay back here a little bit. But I'm okay with where it is. I'm going to direct connect most of my components to these sockets anyway, and I should be okay. There's enough clearance here between power and signal, and I have plenty of open real estate here that I can use if I need to for terminal strips and things. But that'll be the next episode where we start playing around with the actual design and wiring in these tubes. I'm going to start here in the 6550 and work my way back. Okay. Remember I told you have a B+ circuit here, and it feeds into a B+1 and a B+2. We're going to have 3 separate B+ rails on this thing. So the next thing I need to build out is this B+1 and B+2 rail. and that will give me the voltages that I need for the 12AX7 over here, and this 12AX7. So this is B plus 2, and this is B plus 1. Okay, so we're going to feed those tubes separately. So I do need to add one more terminal strip somewhere in here, and just build out these two sections. And we're going to start rocking and rolling. Shouldn't be too hard. Okay, that's it for this episode. We're going to put this up. As you can see, it's pretty neat and clean in there. I am going to do some lead dressing on these wires ultimately when I'm done, and clean them up and make it look a little neater. I don't like to have a sloppy amp, and we're going to go from there. Have a great night, everybody.